Welcome back to Legends May Live. I'm Drew, and today's story is one of unbelievable coincidence, heartbreak, and mystery. But before we get into that, a quick note. All of our stories are true or based off of allegedly true stories. But sometimes we change names or fill gaps, and sometimes there are conflicting sources. So take it for what it is, a podcast, not a documentary. On January 6th, 1982, in the Colorado Rockies, police spot a faint distress signal through the heavy snow and sharp winds. They spring into action to help, but before the night is over, they would unknowingly save the life of a ruthless killer. On January 6th, 1982, Breckenridge, Colorado, in a small ski town surrounded by mountains, Barbara Jo Oberholtzer, or Bobbi Jo to everyone who knew her, had just gotten a well-deserved promotion. Bobbi Jo was bright, driven, and the kind of person people didn't forget. She had been working as a receptionist at a local real estate company, and with her bubbly personality and kind heart, she always left a lasting impression. It's that attitude, along with her intelligence, that had just gotten her a promotion to office manager. She was thrilled, and everyone was excited for her. So after work, she threw on her boots and favorite jacket and headed into town to toast with friends. Normally her husband Jeff would have joined, but as excited as he was to hear the news, he was working late. So she rode with a coworker to the village pub. It was a kind of cozy spot nestled right in the heart of Breckenridge. She walked in, sat down, and ordered her favorite drink as more of her coworkers and friends slowly filed in for the evening. And the rest of the evening was filled with laughter, talks of the future, and just this really great time for everyone. And when it was time to head home, around 7:30, she did something people did all the time in that part of Colorado. She decided to hitchhike. Later that night, around 10 o'clock, Bobbi Jo's husband Jeff pulled into the driveway. He was tired, but still ready to stay up and congratulate his wife on her new role. He parked the car, got out, and walked to the front door, but as he pushed it open, it was dark inside. He wondered if she had already gone to bed. He was a little surprised she didn't stay up to talk, but all in all, it was a long day, and he understood. So he quickly got ready for bed, but as he entered their bedroom, he's hit with confusion. Bobbi Jo wasn't there. He called out for her, but there's no answer. He went room to room, and finally he had to accept that she just wasn't home. Jeff is immediately concerned. It's not that late yet, but it's still nothing like Bobbi. This was a Wednesday night. She had just gotten a promotion and had work the next day. She was never one to stay out all night, and though this was a special occasion, she was far too practical to start now. She wouldn't want to be tired in the morning. She would want to be well rested and fresh, if anything. So Jeff started calling friends and family, anyone who he could think of, to try to find Bobbi Jo. Some of her friends said that, yeah, they had been with her, but she left around 7:30 or 8. They say she left alone, hitchhiking like she had done countless times before, but no one had seen her since. Jeff was growing more worried with every passing hour. So by morning he called the Summit County Sheriff's Office, and right away they sprung into action. They started with taking Jeff's statement, then moved to calling her friends and family, and all of them confirmed what Jeff had already told the police. Then they moved to investigate her home. They confirmed that the car was still there, so they could confidently say that she didn't get home and drive away off into the sunset. So from there, police began checking roads and routes between the village pub and her home in Alma, Colorado, about 20 miles away. And when they did, they found some of her belongings scattered along Highway 285 and Hoosier Pass. There was a glove, a bloody tissue, her backpack, and a single orange sock. They knew they were on the right track now, so invigorated and with a heightened sense of urgency, police continued scouring the area. And it didn't take long until the search would lead them to Hoosier Pass, about halfway between Bobbi's home and the bar. As they covered the area, the officers would notice something protruding from the snow. As they approached, their hearts sank. It was the body of Bobbi Jo, and she was obviously deceased. She had been shot once in the chest and once in the back. She had clearly fought back against whoever did this. She had defensive wounds, bruises on her face and forehead, and she also had marks around her wrists as if they had been tied at some point. But the snow had been piling up long after she was dropped there, so any tracks that once existed were long gone. There was no clear suspect, no motive, and very little evidence of what really happened. So the questions remained. Who would do this, and why Bobbi Jo? The only thing investigators knew for certain was that somewhere out there, a killer had vanished into the cold, and the investigation was struggling. While police were still piecing together the final moments of Bobbi Jo Oberholtzer's life, another woman's footsteps were quietly disappearing in the snow. Her name was Annette Schnee. She was 21 years old, soft-spoken, independent, a hard worker. She had grown up fast, a quiet girl from Wisconsin who moved to Colorado, chasing something new. She lived in a rented cabin in Blue River, a small community just south of Breckenridge, and she worked 2 jobs, one at a pharmacy and the other babysitting to make ends meet. People described her as polite, thoughtful, and a little reserved, but underneath it all there was this spark, the kind of quiet confidence that makes you think someone is just starting to become who they're meant to be. On January 6th, 1982, the same day Bobbi Jo disappeared, Annette left the pharmacy around 4:45 p.m. She told coworkers she was heading back to a doctor's appointment, and afterwards she planned to hitchhike to her babysitting job, which probably seems strange to us now, but much like with Bobbi Jo, this was just how a lot of people got around. Hitchhiking was the Uber of the 70s and 80s. As the Robinson family got ready to leave the house, they gathered their things and waited. But soon they started to get frustrated and a little concerned. Annette was late, which was very out of character. Then another 30 minutes go by and she's still not there. The Robinsons decide, okay, maybe she's just forgot she was supposed to come today, and this is just really not like her, so we'll just have to reschedule our plans, but we're going to have a really good talk with her about this. But the next day, she didn't show up for work either. Coworkers knew this was not like her at all, so they tried to call Annette, but no answer. Then they called around and quickly learned that she had missed her babysitting appointment and doctor appointment too. They were immediately concerned, and her manager called the police to report her missing. Police opened a file immediately and began making calls and retracing her steps, but there were no tracks to follow. No glove in the snow or blood on the highway, just a girl who never made it to work. The case was at a standstill before it ever started. In the beginning, no one made a connection between the 2 women. Bobbi Jo was 29, Annette was 21. Bobbi Jo was married and working in real estate, while Annette was single and balancing part-time jobs. They didn't know one another and didn't run in the same circles. And yet, they both vanished on the exact same night from the same area while hitchhiking. June 1982, 6 months after Annette Schnee vanished. The high county is starting to thaw. Ice is melting off the pine branches, creeks swelling with snow melt. The roads are muddy but drivable again. And just outside of Fairplay, Colorado, in a remote wooded area off of a dirt road, a fisherman's moving along the edge of a shallow creek. It's quiet, relaxing, and beautiful, until he sees something in the water, something that doesn't belong. At first, it just looks like a bundle of fabric caught in the current, pinned beneath a log, but as he gets closer, he sees a boot, then a leg, and then the unmistakable curve of a human shoulder. It was Annette Schnee, face down, partially submerged. She was still wearing the same clothes she was last seen in, jeans, gloves, and her winter jacket. One of her boots had come loose in the current. The rest of her body had been held in place by the weight of ice and snow for months. Right away, he ran to call the police. When they arrived, they found that there were no drag marks or signs that she had been dumped. It didn't look like she had fallen there. She had been shot in the back, execution style. But there was something else, something so small it might have been missed. On one of her feet, she was wearing a single orange sock. Not a pair, just one. And investigators immediately recognized it, because they had found its match back in January at the scene of Bobbi Joe's murder. The sock had been lying in the snow near Bobbi's backpack. Initially, they thought it was hers, but Bobbi Joe was wearing white socks when she was found, and now they knew why the orange one was nearby. That orange sock didn't belong to Bobbi Joe. It belonged to Annette, which meant, in the hours between their disappearances, both women were in the same place. Hauntingly, possibly even in the same vehicle at the same time. For months these were separate stories, isolated tragedies, but now the sock made them one, and just like that, the case changed. They weren't dealing with random disappearances. This was targeted, intentional, a predator moving through the mountains, watching and waiting. But the sock was only the beginning, because even with that connection, they still had no name, an undetermined motive, and no witnesses. By the summer of 1982, investigators were sure of one thing. Whoever killed Bobbi Joe and Annette was the same person. He had struck on the same day in the same region and gotten away clean, leaving behind no fingerprints, fibers, or anything substantial to go off of. Just a single sock and two grieving families. And though the sock tied them together, it wasn't enough. Police combed through dozens of suspects, locals, drivers, drifters, people with violent records, weird alibis, broken stories, but nothing stuck. Composite sketches were made from reported sightings of possible suspects, but no one matched. Police started offering a reward for information, and at first, tips trickled in, but they quickly faded out. The case stalled, and then it stopped altogether. Time has a strange effect on grief. In the beginning, everything hurts. Everything feels like it's about to break open. But when the answers don't come, when the seasons keep turning and the phone never rings, the pain doesn't stop, it just hardens. Annette's family moved away from Colorado. Bobbi Joe's husband, Jeff, never stopped talking to reporters, pleading for help. But by the late 1980s, the story had all but vanished from the public eye. The case was cold, and for decades, it stayed that way. But the thing about cold cases is that they're never really dead. They're just waiting for science to catch up, for evidence to evolve, for someone to ask the right question one more time. And in this case, that question would start with a beer can and end with a name no one saw coming. The case files for Bobbi Joe Oberholtzer and Annette Schnee sit in silence until someone opens one, just one, and says, "Let's try again." In 2013, in large thanks to Jeff Oberholtzer's efforts to find his wife's killer, Detective Wendy Kipple reopened the case. The Park County Sheriff's Office re-examined everything. They interviewed old contacts and looked at forensic data. Little progress was made, but Detective Kipple didn't give up. The investigation keeps going for years, though at a snail's pace. Until finally, January 2020 comes. And it seems like a whole different world than the 80s. The snow still falls over Breckenridge, but now we have satellites watching. Genealogy sites mapping bloodlines. DNA tests seem to peer backward in time. Decades earlier, investigators had preserved semen recovered from Annette Schnee's body, and blood from the glove found near Bobbi Joe. At the time, it meant nothing. The technology to connect it to anyone just wasn't there yet. But now, Forensic genealogy could build a family tree from a single sample. Not just a hit in a database, but an entire genetic map stretching out like roots. The samples sent to United Data Collection, a private lab specializing in cold case genealogy. They extract the DNA profile and start comparing it to the online database. No direct matches, but they did find third cousins, great uncles, and other distant ties. Then, slowly and painfully, they started building backwards, piece by piece. And after sifting through countless marriage records, census reports, and birth certificates, a name emerges: Alan Lee Phillips. Phillips was a 70-year-old mechanic. He's a longtime resident of Clear Creek County, and in 1982, he was living in the area. But before they confront him, investigators want to be sure. So they follow him and wait. He has no idea that detectives are watching. Days turn into weeks. They track his routines. As he visits gas stations, hardware store, and goes about his normal daily life, police are getting nowhere. Until one day, he finishes a beer and tosses the empty can into a public trash bin, then walks away. He has no idea he's just sealed his fate. Detectives move in and retrieve it. The lab tests it. The DNA runs through the system, and then a match to the blood on Bobbi Jo Oberholtzer's glove. To Alan Lee Phillips. 40 years later, they finally had their killer. After 39 years, the sock, the bodies, the silence, all of it pointed to one man. Alan Phillips had gotten away with murder for decades until one beer can dragged him back. But when investigators started digging into his past, they realized something else. He had almost been caught that night. In fact, in one of the most chilling coincidences in true crime history, they rescued him. On January 6, 1982, the same night that Bobbi Jo Oberholtzer and Annette Schnee vanished into the dark, Alan Lee Phillips was rescued. Not arrested, not questioned, but rescued. It was just after midnight when a dispatcher picked up a strange signal, a distress light blinking in Morse code. High in the mountains near Guanella Pass, an isolated road near where Bobby's body was found, a snowplow driver was dispatched along with a deputy, and what he found stranded in a snowbank nearly 11,000 feet above sea level was a middle-aged man freezing and alone in his pickup truck. That man was Alan Phillips. He told rescuers he had just gone out for a drive, and when the blizzard hit, he lost sight of the road, panicked, and ended up taking one wrong turn after another until he had gotten completely lost. The snowplow driver just chuckled and remarked how lucky he was that someone saw his signal as they helped dig him out. They let Phillips warm up in the front of the cruiser for a bit and then sent him on his way. No one thought twice about it. Not until decades later, when investigators re-examined the report and realized something gut-wrenching. He had been pulled out of the same mountain pass where Bobbi Jo was killed just hours before, and by some of the same authorities who were about to start looking for her. He wasn't hiding. He was almost caught and didn't even flinch. In 2021, after matching the DNA and reviewing the evidence, authorities arrested Phillips at his home in Clear Creek County. Neighbors described him as quiet, polite, and just generally unremarkable. Just a mechanic living his life like anybody else. But behind that past was a trail of silence and snow, finally melting into truth. Phillips pled not guilty and tried to explain it all away, but the jury didn't buy it. The blood on Bobbi Jo's glove linked Phillips to her death, and the semen linked him to Annette's murder. In September of 2022, after a lengthy trial, Alan Lee Phillips was found guilty of both murders and sentenced to life in prison. For 39 years, he kept his secret, lived his life, built a family and a business, all while the families of Bobbi Jo and Annette waited for justice. In September of 2022, it had been 40 years since the two women disappeared in the Colorado winter. 2 lifetimes lived in shadow, 2 families waiting, hoping for someone to say, "We see you, we know what happened." Now they finally get to hear it in a courtroom. Alan Lee Phillips sits at the defense table, now his once brown hair gray and his skin filled with wrinkles. The years have caught up with him, and justice finally has too. The prosecution lays out the evidence. DNA recovered from Annette Schnee's body, the beer can that confirmed the match, the rescue report placing Phillips in the mountain the night of both women's murders, and the final piece, that orange sock linking 2 lives, 1 killer, and a day that had gone unexplained for decades. Witnesses testify, members of the family speak. Bobbi Joe's husband, Jeff Oberholtzer, who never stopped talking to the press, never stopped believing that someone would be held accountable, sits through every minute. So does Annette's family. They flew back to Colorado to be there, to see the man who took her, to hear the jury say the words they had been waiting for. Guilty. Phillips is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. There's no celebration in the courtroom, just long, quiet exhales and tears. Grief that's aged but never truly healed. Because justice doesn't bring people back, it just helps to honor their memory. Barbara Bobbi Joe Oberholtzer was 29 years old. She was a wife, a friend, a woman on the cusp of a new chapter, celebrating a promotion the night she disappeared. Annette Schnee was 21, a daughter, a caretaker. She worked 2 jobs and dreamed of something more. They didn't know each other, but their lives crossed paths. In a car with a man neither of them should have trusted. On a road where no one heard them scream. On a night when the world stayed silent. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you for listening, and if you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. And never forget, it only takes one voice, one clue, one question that refuses to die to change everything. Until next time, stay curious, stay sharp, and stay vigilant.